For chapter 2.1, we're going to be multiplying fractions, and multiplying fractions is probably one of the easiest things we get to do with fractions. So in this first example, where they want us to find 1/5 times 1/3, all we're going to do is we're going to multiply our two numerators across, and then multiply our two denominators across, and then we'll check to see if there's any kind of simplifying that we have to do. So 1 times 1 is going to be 1, of course, so that's our new numerator. And then 5 times 3 is 15, so that's our new denominator. And since you can't really go lower on 1 and 15 because the only thing they have in common is 1, then that would be your final answer, 1/15. For example 2, we're going to be multiplying fractions with common factors, and we're going to try to find 8/9 times 3/4. And in this case, common factors, what we're going to be looking for is we're going to be looking diagonally at our fractions. So we're going to be looking at our 8 and our 4, and then we're going to be looking at our 9 and our 3 here, and we're going to see if they have any factors in common. So when we look at 8 and 4, again, you can go back to the chapter 1 stuff we did looking for the greatest common factor, and luckily for those two numbers, we've worked with them enough. We can probably figure out that 4 can go into 4 and it can go into 8, so we'll just use that number. So 4, if we divide it by 4, gives us 1, and then 8 divided by 4, oops, I'm going to write it over here, gives us 2. So we're going to cross out those other numbers that we'd had originally, and we're going to use these new fraction numbers. And then we do the same thing going the other direction. So we're looking for a common factor of 9 and 3, and we know that 3 goes into both of those. So again, it's 3 divided by 3, which will give us 1, and 9 divided by 3, which will give us 3. And I'm always going to encourage you to rewrite your new fractions because it can get pretty messy in here. And I know that a lot of kids can follow it, but it's a really good habit to get into to just rewrite them. So this first new fraction is 2/3, so we're going to write that. And then multiplied by this second new fraction, which is actually 1/1 after we did all that reducing and simplifying, and then we just multiply across again, and we have 2 times 1, which is 2, and 3 times 1, which is 3, so the answer to 8/9 times 3/4 would be 2/3. Here are a couple of on-your-own problems to try. For example 3, we're going to try a real-life application, and those word problems are going to keep coming up, so this is good practice. It says you have 2/3 of a bag of flour, and you use 3/4 of the flour to make empanada dough. How much of the entire bag do you use to make the dough? And one thing you're going to notice that we'll talk about quite a bit is this word of a lot of times does mean multiplication, and so we'll be watching for that, and they kind of show you the little picture over here. So if you have 2/3 of a bag of flour here and we use 3/4 of that, then we have two ways that we can look at it. For method 1, we can use a model, and over here you can see we have the square system, and I'm going to kind of write over it to break it down for you. So what they can do, and I'm sure you've done fraction models before, is the first fraction that we came across was 2/3. We have 2/3 of a bag of flour. So we do a quick fraction model for 2/3, and so we're going to draw 3 equal rows here, and of those 3 equal rows, we go ahead and shade in 2 of them. So that's 2/3 right there. And then going the other direction, we can draw in 3/4. So we've got 4 equal rows going this direction, and then we shade in 3 of those fourths. So 1, 2, 3 of the fourths, and that's our 3/4 representation. And then what we do is we look at any of the squares that have both colors that are shaded. And in this one, you can see that these 3 and these 3 have both the blue and the red shading. So that means that 6 of our boxes have it of the total number of possible boxes, which is 12. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So what we have is 6/12 of the entire bag of flour, and then we can simplify that 6/12 down to 1/2 of the entire bag. So the model is just one way to show that. For method 2, it's basically just not using a model, it's using the regular multiplication of fractions. And so again, we're going to try to find out what 3/4 of 2/3 is. And again, I told you a little bit earlier that we're going to keep using that word of to mean multiply in these kinds of word problems. So 3/4 times 2/3, we're going to look to see if we can divide out any common factors to simplify. So we're going to look this way, and of course 3 divided by 3 can give us 1 in each case, and then we'll look the other way and we can have 4 and 2, and they have a common factor of 2, so if we divide this by 2 we get 1, and if we divide this by 2 we get 2. So our new fractions are 1/2 times 1/1, and then that would equal 1/2 because we multiply 1 times 1 to give us 1, 2 times 1 to give us 2. So just like we got with the model, that would mean that you use 1/2 of the bag of flour. Alright, we're going to stop about halfway through this section because there are still a couple of additional examples, but I want to make sure you have the hang of the multiplying regular fractions before we start tackling mixed numbers. So you're going to go through and go to Big Green, and you're going to go to page 59 and do 9 through 21 odds. And then on page 61 in this section, you're going to do 60 through 64 all, and that's the fair game review. It's going back to chapter 1, and remember that in the little blue writing next to some of the problems for numbers 60 to 64, it might tell you what section that came from. So if you're having a hard time with it, go back to those video notes in your notebook, or go back to that section in Big Green and try to remember how to do it because that's stuff that we'll want to be able to do all year long.